What NASCAR just did to Kaulig Racing is absolutely unfair. Kaulig has been given a penalty that has raised the NASCAR world on its feet, and at this point, we couldn't help but ask, why is NASCAR so biased towards different teams on the grid? After Hendrick Motorsports won an appeal for practically the same penalty that Kaulig was penalized for as well, the not-so-famous team didn't get the treatment they'd hoped they'd get, and the team has responded with a furious note. NASCAR explained their actions as well, and it seems like we are entering a very interesting and suspenseful period in which NASCAR is about to get bashed again for its decision. Join us as we go over Kaulig Racing's penalty, as well as why NASCAR was wrong to treat the team the way they did. We have one promise for you: we won't waste your time in the following 8 minutes, so buckle up. Kaulig Racing is a team that was penalized during the same race weekend as Hendrick Motorsports, as the number 31 Cup Series team was docked 100 driver owner points as well as 10 playoff points. The penalty that was given to them was perceived as a harsh one, but it seems like NASCAR doesn't want to deal any differently when it comes to modified parts, as Kaulig Racing was found using modified single-source supplied parts, specifically the hood louvers. The same thing was found on the 4 cars that raced for Hendrick Motorsports, and the penalty was pretty much the same for them as well. However, one of the most successful teams in the sport's history has decided to appeal the penalty, and they've won the appeal. The points that they made were valid, and they said that they were not responsible for how the single-source supplier hands out the parts to them, meaning they work with what they have. But before we go further into NASCAR's decision, make sure to like our video, subscribe to our channel, as well as turn on the notification posts. This is why NASCAR decided to take away the points penalty from Hendrick Motorsports drivers and reinstate the same order to the end of the Phoenix Raceway weekend, the weekend that they were penalized in. And keep in mind that this was the weekend that Hendrick Motorsports saw all 4 of its drivers end up in the top 10, with William Byron winning his 2nd consecutive race. But the way that NASCAR treated Kaulig Racing is definitely something controversial and something that asks for further insight. And when the team applied for an appeal, they didn't get the result that they wanted. Quite frankly, it was the result that was expected after NASCAR did what they did with Hendrick Motorsports' penalty. As an addition to the initial penalty, the team was fined $100,000 and the crew chief was to serve a 4-race suspension. Keep in mind that the only difference that was publicized by NASCAR between these 2 teams' infringements was that Hendrick's hood louvers were discovered before the practice session at Phoenix on the 10th of March, while Kaulig's louvers were discovered during the pre-qualifying inspection on the 11th of March. In both of these cases, the louvers were confiscated for further examination, and all teams replaced the louvers, and the drivers raced with unmodified versions in the race that took place on the 12th of March. The fight against these penalties was mostly upheld by a 3-person appeals panel on Wednesday, as they only reduced the point penalty from 100 points to 75 points. This is practically 25% of the result that Hendrick Motorsports has received, and the fact that Kaulig Racing only has 2 full-time drivers that violated the code against the 4 drivers of Hendrick Motorsports goes on to show that NASCAR is indeed criticized for all the right reasons. Chris Rice made an appearance on FS1's NASCAR Race Hub to discuss the decision of the panel, calling it disheartening, as he went on to elaborate. You know what goes on in your garage, and you know what happens in single-source suppliers, and knowing the rules and different things is really tough nowadays. And I sit here and I stand behind my guys. I stand behind everybody at Kaulig Racing. We upheld the rules, and we did what we know is legal, so it's been a tough hour or 2. I'm not going to lie to you, but we'll get through this. We're a very strong race team. We're only 2 years into the Cup Series. That's what is big about our race team. We don't give up. So we're not going to give up on this, so it's just kind of disheartening. Throughout the process of the appeal, Rice revealed to the world that he had been in contact with HMS, specifically Vice Chairman Jeff Gordon and Vice President of Competition Chad Knaus, who all had some interesting things to say about NASCAR's decision to penalize them for what they've reportedly done on the hood louvers. Furthermore, Rice has slammed NASCAR yet again for how these penalties affected the young race team, and it's practically an impact that goes well beyond the points. Keep in mind that Kaulig Racing is now nearly at the bottom of the championship standings, and while everyone talks about the points as the biggest hit that the team has taken from this penalty, Rice believes that the other things that come as a repercussion from this penalty are unmatchable, such as losing Trent Owens, the crew chief that got hit with the penalty. While talking about this matter, Rice went on to elaborate. Losing Trent Owens, number 31 crew chief, for 4 weeks is pretty tough to us. We're not that deep. We have 3 Xfinity cars that I think at any point in time, we could use those guys, but we have jobs to do also. We're not as deep as other teams that have been in the business for 20 or 10 years. We doubled our staff this year, so we are deeper than what we were last year. But losing Trent Owens is devastating to Justin Haley. They just started clicking last year. We've had a rough start to the year, but they'll start clicking again. 4 races missing that guy is going to be pretty tough. But 100 points to a race team like us where we sit and race somewhere between 15th to 20th, we have some good runs every now and then, but it's pretty devastating also. One question remains open. Did NASCAR do what they've done purposefully just because they knew Kaulig Racing did not have the reputation and success behind their names like Hendrick Motorsports to be a huge threat to the sport's looks? After all, if the sport went on to forgive both of the teams in the same manner, the credibility would be under a huge question mark. And admitting that you applied 2 penalties in the same racing weekend wrong would be something too much of a burden for you to carry. Rice went on to say that while he understands the severity of the penalties, Kaulig Racing did nothing wrong, as he received around 50 text messages from team presidents, crew chiefs, and other people inside the sport. Some of them said that the outcome of the appeal is unbelievable to say the least, which only leads us to the next question. Is Kaulig Racing ready for another appeal? While Rice declined to comment on whether the difference in severity between Hendricks versus Kaulig is fair, adding that it is not up to him to decide that. He has yet to inform the media about his actions on whether or not Kaulig will take the route of another appeal. The announcement is expected to be made early in the morning the following day, but from his feelings, as Rice added, the team is likely to continue down the path that they've already chosen, which is fighting NASCAR's decision and taking this to the next level. The fans are also enraged when it comes to NASCAR's actions, as one fan wrote, "Unless the appeals panel discloses details, I have no other way to rationalize this than to say brand privilege is a thing. The Hendricks brand must invoke an institutional human response, action, feeling, influence, respect, or something that the Kaulig brand does not." And it's not just the fans from Kaulig Racing that are having a hard time comprehending the decision brought by NASCAR, as Brett Giffen, who is also the spotter for Kaulig Racing, came down harshly on the sport's decision and the recent happenings. He was very angry as to why NASCAR did what they did, saying that he would lose his mind if his team lost this appeal, which has turned out to be the outcome of the entire saga. Brett, however, did say something interesting during his podcast talk with Freddie and TJ, adding that Knaus reportedly said that Hendrick Motorsports had to modify the hoods due to the fact that they wouldn't close, and that is why the team admitted to modifying the things. With revelations like this coming out and the appeals panel reinstating the lost points to the team, things need to be monitored very closely. With this in mind, it's evident that NASCAR has managed to put itself in a very hairy position yet again, and this time it's going to be a bit harder for them to get out of it. What are your thoughts on NASCAR's verdict on Kaulig Racing? Do you think that the hood louvers penalty is a proper one? And do you think that the team should have won the appeal in a similar way that Hendrick Motorsports won it? Let us know in the comments below, and after you do that, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification posts.